presentation set, so you're welcome to look around and walk around with the large blogs, but everything that's depicted here is small format to show
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. And welcome this evening to our town meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this evening. Hopefully we'll get a lot of information presented to us. Basically on the proposed South Avenue redevelopment project. As some of you know, we were here in July presenting the redevelopment agreement and also the financials for the project with the council supported. This is hopefully one of some open meetings with the redeveloper. And with that, I'd like to introduce the Council President Tedesco, who put this meeting together, and she was willing to address it.
Thanks, Mayor. Appreciate you having me up here with you. And it is great to see so many people here tonight. And I know I see a lot of familiar faces from when Mr. Russo and his fellow professionals were here last year discussing this before it even came to votes before the council. And I do want to thank the attorney for Mr. Russo, Chris Minks, because he and I spoke a number of times on the phone to set up this meeting, which is great, and it's wonderful that we have so many people here so you can get your questions that you have answered directly by Mr. Russo himself. And also I want to thank the school for allowing us to have it here. It's a great venue that's much bigger than Borough Hall Chambers. So, obviously this is not an official meeting of the council or planning board or anything like that. This is an informal town hall style meeting so that you can get your questions answered and we can hear a little bit more from the developer himself. And with that said, I would like to turn it over to Chris Minks and Mr. Ed Russo.
Thank you. Next.
It looks like the mute button, but...
Oh, the mute button?
Thank you, sir.
Okay, no problem.
And thank you for your technical expertise. Good evening, everybody. I don't know if any of you have been to any of the meetings that have occurred thus far. There have been many, many meetings for various purposes, both for the planning board and council meetings, during which the fate of the Casale and the Petro properties was discussed, studied, analyzed, critiqued, and ultimately a vision formulated. We are here today to talk to you about, to represent our application, which is actually pending before the planning board currently, that we hope to have commenced in November. The hearings will begin in November. And our application really is the realization of what we believe that vision in the ultimately adopted redevelopment plan is. We've worked very closely with members of the mayor and council, members of the planning board, borough professionals, tirelessly over many years. I joined Russo Development, the parent, if you will, of the property owner and developer, back in 2012, and this became principally my first project with the company, and I've been living with it ever since. So it's something I'm very intimately familiar with and fond of. I'm a former renter in Garwood. My wife and I lived in Garwood when we were first together and first married, and I live in Mountainside, so I still consider Garwood very much a part of me and a part of our family. So it's a project that's near and dear to my heart. The purpose of tonight's meeting is, as Ms. Tedesco correctly pointed out, a town hall style meeting. We're here because Russo Development, and in this case our ownership entity, South Avenue Urban Renewal LLC, want to hear from the members of the community. We want to be your neighbor, we want to be a good corporate citizen in Garwood, and accordingly, in order for us to do that, in order for us to make sure that we have the best designed and thought through project for this property, for Garwood property, we want to hear feedback from the residents of the community. We've done so at countless hearings thus far and meetings, and this process will continue, not only in anticipation of what we hope to be a planning board approval for this project, but also during the course of construction. That's something that was discussed early on at the planning board level, a recommendation that was made that town hall style meetings be conducted to keep the community updated on the progress of the project, and it's something that we intend to honor. The project, as I'm sure you all know, is the Casale and Petrozello properties. It consists of lots 1, 2, 4, and 5 on South Avenue. The former industrial site, it's a historic industrial site. Many decades ago, it was an electronic motor manufacturing facility, and then for several decades, it was an Alcoa plant, during which stewardship became very environmentally impacted, and to this day is a very significantly environmentally contaminated property. More recently, it was the site of Petrozello and Plastic Extrusions Company, a couple of plastics extrusions companies, owned and operated by various factions of the Petrozello family, and also Casale Industries, or what's commonly known as Casale Industries, owned by the Casale family. Those uses, as you know, are no longer in place. Those businesses have either closed or they've relocated, and the property became available for sale. And we've been working on it since in or about 2012, and then in earnest toward its redevelopment since about 2014, June of 2014. The history of its redevelopment, of the redevelopment process, is very long, and the digested version is that the planning board was charged with reviewing the property. The municipality commissioned a study to see if the property qualified as what's called a blighted property, such that it is available for redevelopment under certain applicable laws in New Jersey. That property was deemed blighted and was named a redevelopment area, and subsequently the company I work for was identified as the designated redeveloper. A redevelopment plan was then adopted in conjunction with the work of the planning board, its professionals, and the mayor and council. It was subsequently adopted by the council. And that planning board essentially governs the zoning of the property. It's an overlay, if you will, of the prior zoning, the permitted uses, and the types of development. And that plan very clearly illustrated and described a vision for what the town, what the borough wanted to see done on this property. And our plan is not only, it's not derivative, it's not merely derivative of that redevelopment plan, it is what is called an as-of-right application. We've submitted an application that's before the planning board that does not seek deviations from the plan, does not seek variances, does not request that the town rethink what it's already done over the past several years. It respects and honors the vision that the town's included in their redevelopment plan, and again, it tries to realize that vision through the actual development. I misspoke, we actually do seek a few deviations. The deviations that we seek, though, are not what you would typically encounter. The redevelopment plan contemplates certain minimum unit sizes for 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom studios. We actually kind of buck the trend. We're not asking you to allow us to build bigger units. We're actually going a little below, very slightly below, some of those minimum unit sizes, which will have a beneficial effect on the lack of school children being generated, less traffic, less parking needs. So what we're actually asking for, we think, improves the plan and actually improves it to the betterment in terms of certain things that you all may be concerned about. With me tonight I have Douglas Bartels to my left. He's our chief engineer and project engineer. He too has been working and living with this project since 2012. And we have Mr. Edward Russo, who's the principal of both Russo Development and South Avenue Urban Renewal LLC, the owner of the subject properties. I'm not going to profess to take you through the entire site plan. This is not a hearing. It's not intended to be a hearing, and I don't want to put you all to sleep. You're all more than welcome to join us at the planning board hearings to hear our experts provide testimony on every aspect of the project. However, I wanted to bring Mr. Bartels, who can speak to engineering and certain construction aspects of the site, as well as the buildings, as well as Mr. Russo, who can provide an overview of virtually any aspect of the project. He lives and breathes it intimately. It would be inappropriate for me not to stress the fact that this project is an environmentally constrained site. I stated it earlier that during its industrial life, it was a very heavily contaminated site. It remains such. As such, there are certain responsibilities that we have, and those include working with not only the Department of Environmental Protection, which is a state of New Jersey agency, but also in this case for this property, the Environmental Protection Agency, which is the federal oversight agency for environmental cleanup. In this case, this is under the EPA's jurisdiction because of the magnitude of certain of the contamination on the property. In order for us to render the property suitable and safe for residential use and development is a very significant investment that my client is prepared to make. And we have been working very diligently with all of the applicable agencies, most recently and most directly with the EPA. And many of you may be wondering, well, when are you going to knock this thing down? When is this going to start? When are we going to see something happen? And I assure you, we are chomping at the bit. I get calls from my construction department every day asking, when can we cut all the utilities? When can we start this? When can we start that? Unfortunately, because of the nature of the remediation that we're going to be undertaking here, and the extent to which the property will be remediated, meaning cleaned of its environmental contamination, we are not able to move any of the asbestos out at this point. We're not able to remove roofing tiles or anything that is tangentially related to the remediation of the site. We are in a holding pattern until the EPA gives us their approval. I actually received correspondence today from that agency that makes it look like that's coming very, very soon. They were down to asking us what the address of the developer and property owner is for the purposes of notice, which is really good news. So that is underway, and we are in that holding pattern, waiting for that final approval so we can finalize the demolition permits and start the process of raising the site, getting rid of the eyesore, making it safe, because we're also concerned about people having unlawful access to the site and, God forbid, getting hurt. That is all in process and is something that we look forward to in the very near future. Again, I've spoken enough. We are here to hear your thoughts, your concerns. To the extent that we're able, we will answer your questions. We will answer them as directly as possible. But this is also really for our benefit because we truly want to hear your concerns, your insights, your experiences, so that we can consider them during the course of the planning board process, and to the extent applicable or appropriate, make revisions to our plans or otherwise address your concerns. So with that, I want to introduce Edward Russo. Mr. Russo can say a few words about the company and our vision for the property.
Thank you, Chris. So I don't want to take much more time. I know Chris gave a great overview of the current status of the site and some of the work that's been done up to this point on the planning side, and also with respect to the environmental permitting and ultimately the remediation of the site. I just, before we get started really hearing from you and addressing some of your comments, I just want to say that we appreciate the opportunity to be here. We thank the mayor and the council president for inviting us to come. I think we've done a number of town hall meetings, community outreach meetings on past projects, and they tend to be very beneficial for us and helpful to us as we go through the process. And I hope for everyone that's here, I mean, you took the time to be here tonight, which we appreciate, and we hope that we can answer whatever questions that you have, and we'll do the best of our ability to do that. Between myself and Doug, I think we can address many of the questions on the engineering and the design of the site. Chris can as well, and as Chris mentioned, we are going to be coming before the planning board very soon, and we're going to have a host of other experts, our traffic engineer, our architect of record, just to name a few that will also be available, landscape architect, to be address more specific questions and comments. But we're here today to listen, and again, we thank all of you for coming out.
First person I'd step up to the microphone, please, as we do at the council meeting. Your name and address. Try to limit your words to 3 minutes.
Hello. Arlene Yanagasha, 211 Cedar Street. When all this goes through and you start construction, what times and days will your people be working?
So, every town is slightly different in terms of ordinances that they have. Can you hear me? Yeah. Sorry. Okay. In terms of ordinances that are in place that govern when work can start and finish during a normal work week. So we would really defer to Garwood's ordinance, which I apologize, I'm not 100% familiar with what the work hours are. I can tell you that in general, for most towns that we work in, usually you can't start construction before 7 a.m. during the week, and I want to say it's 6 to 7 o'clock p.m. somewhere in there that you have to be finished. Work is typically allowed on Saturdays. Saturday starts are sometimes later than a weekday start, and obviously we wouldn't be working on Sundays.
Okay, so you'll be strict with that because I live next door to when the senior home was being built. They started as early as 6 o'clock. So that's why I'm concerned about the children that have to walk up that street. Like, are you guys going to provide like extra crossing guards, or just to ensure that there's, children are children, so they're gonna.
No, of course, that's an important comment. Normally, before we start construction, we would meet with the construction official, the police chief, perhaps a member of the fire department, just to logistically agree on a game plan for where construction vehicles will be parked during construction, how the property will be fenced and secured. And with respect to work hours, I can tell you, we will not deviate from whatever the allowed work hours are. In the event of a special circumstance, I don't want to say an emergency, but occasionally during the course of a project, which, in this case, we could be talking about, 18 months start to finish.
As far as the local ordinances, he is correct. During the week it's 7 a.m. Saturday is 8 a.m.
I guess my question is, will they restrict it? Because I know they weren't with the casino.
Sure. We absolutely will be, but, to be as honest as I can be, there tends to be times during construction where, for whatever reason, maybe it's utility work that we're only allowed to do in the street at night because there's access limitations put on us by the county or by the borough. I mean, in those special circumstances, we would go to the borough in advance of the work being done and give notice and say, look, we need to deviate from the allowable work hours just for this particular case, and we would defer to the borough to either approve that request or not approve it, but we wouldn't.
So with the 7 a.m. though, is the school supposed to provide a cross guard, or you guys need that?
That's typically, it's not something that the developer would necessarily be responsible to do unless our construction is adhered with a normal route of access or a normal crossing area. We're not going to be working within the crossing areas. So to the extent that there's crossing guards there now, I would imagine those crossing guards would remain. If we were creating a new crossing, or we were otherwise interfering with that free crossing for those children, we would then discuss it with the borough. But we will maintain a very safe and secure site, either with screening or fencing or some other means to protect the site, make sure it's not something that children can access, and certainly very strictly adhere to these things, every extent possible with municipal ordinance.
That you guys are already on it. So that's why it makes sense that extra safety would be there for the children. You can start to
The benefit that we now on this project, and I think that you folks have, is that we are not going to be able to hide from the authorities. We're right across the street, and we already have a very good dialogue with the chief of the department and also the fire department and the also emergency management guard. So we're talking with them, familiar with them as they are with us about issues, including safety.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Someone else?
I turn it on.
I don't need it. Joe Golding, 25 Second Avenue, Carwood. Been to a number of meetings, didn't make everyone. Had mixed feelings about this, but it looks like it's a doable thing, you know, we're gonna go forward and that's it. In past meetings, I put the setback of the hall, all the buildings, is gonna be like 20-something or 30-something feet. And looking in the very last picture here, I see no more than maybe, just roughly guessing, 12 feet from the street, the setback.
So,
Then we're gonna have a tunnel vision.
yeah, I'm not there, but thank you for your question. Doug Bartels, our engineer, can walk you through the setbacks on all sides of the property. So we have a full-size copy of the site plan.
So the building corner, the building setback varies because of the architecture of the building, but there are bump outs along the front of the building on the west side that are within 10 feet at the most extreme bump out, 10 feet to the property line, which is another 12 feet to the curb line. So 22 feet total from the roadway itself, 10 feet to the
So
property
we're talking 22 feet.
from the roadway, yes,
From the roadway, all right.
at the absolute closest point. Then, as you slide back, you know, there's a little more relief, probably an additional 4 feet to sort of the main frontage of the building.
Yeah, this last page of the picture, look, we're going to be 12 feet away.
That's due to the angle of the view, because you're
All
sort
right.
of looking down. But yeah, it's as I mentioned, 10 feet to the extreme bump out, and about 22 to the rear.
There's a apartment complex or whatever in Union on Stuyvesant Avenue, and honest to God, I think it's maybe 12 feet to the curb, that's a lot, that's right there.
Right, no, it's definitely farther than that. And again, that's, so, you know, obviously that's this stretch of the building, and then you step
The middle is
back
further
in,
back,
much farther
right.
back.
Yeah.
Retail, again, you have, you know, 2 legs where you come up within about 10 feet to the right of way. Again, it's an additional 12 to 15 feet to the curb line, but most of it is set back an additional distance. This is almost 40 feet back.
Okay.
From the right of way line.
Yeah. All right, thanks for clarifying that.
Sorry.
Question regarding these setbacks. I noticed a nice clean look, minus power lines. And how is that going to fit into your setback? Is it going to be on the street yet, or is it going to be clean like it's showing? Because that's going to interfere with your 10 feet setback.
So, I believe the power lines are on the south side of South Avenue, but is that correct, Doug?
No.
Or on the north side?
Yeah, but they're just behind the curb line.
It looks like they're on both sides.
They're just behind the curb line. The buildings will be approximately 20 feet behind the
So you know, your 9.1, your interpretation there is not really realistic. I was interpreting it as being underground power.
the rendering image you're
Yeah.
saying? Yeah, the rendering image is the power lines will not show clarity.
Okay, that makes a difference in the view. Secondly, I'd like to know about the apartment rentals. Is that going to be corporate rentals or is it the individual ownership?
There'll be a combination of corporate rentals and individual residents that will be signing leases. I mean, the vast majority of leases would likely be for individual residents, but we do occasionally, have interest and applications from companies that are renting on behalf of one or more different prospective residents. I mean, I think in this location, if we were adjacent to a major office complex, for example, you might get more corporate rentals. I think we'll get a few here, but not more than a handful.
Do you have any estimates of what the tax or the structure is going to be for rental fees, in those apartments?
Normally, there aren't that many fees that are paid outside of normal monthly rent. The typical ones are, if someone has a vehicle or they have 2 vehicles, they would pay an extra fee to park those vehicles. You know, we have a very large amenity program in the building. There's probably 15 to 16,000 square feet of club room, you know, fitness center, leasing office, media lounge, spaces that residents would have the right to use for a monthly fee. And then we typically charge a fee for, depending on the number of pets. It would be a pet-friendly building. We intend to have a dog run on the property. So, and we, you know, as a rule of thumb, we tend to get 15 to 20% of our residents have pets. Other than those, I mean, generally everything else is included in rent.
So you can't estimate what your monthly fees are going to be at?
Well, I mean, typically, you know, pet fees are usually around $50 a month. Parking fees can range between.
I'm talking about the actual rental fees.
Oh, you're the base rent you're talking about. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the ancillary. You know, the thing that we use to try to estimate rents is we look at surrounding communities and we see what they're renting for. So the best comps or comparables to this project would be, you know, the apartment community on the north side of the rail line, just off North Ave, across from ShopRite, which are primarily one-bedroom units. I mean, there I think they're renting one-bedroom units in the low $2,000 per month range, you know, $2,000, $2,100, $2,200, depending on the unit size. Whether there's a balcony or there isn't, one floor. I mean, you're usually in that, you know, 2,000 plus or minus per month range. There's no one-bedroom units there, but if you go to Cranford and you look at, you know, the project that was built on South Avenue, directly across from the train station, which is primarily two-bedroom units. There's a few one-bedroom units there as well. You look at the two-bedroom rents; they're in the high $2,000 per month range, you know, mid to high 2,000s. Some of the real large units, corner units with higher ceilings, might be over 3,000 a month. And we have a few studios in our project as well, which are, you know, smaller units around 500 square feet. Those would probably rent for $1,700 a month, $1,600 a month. They're harder to comp out because there aren't that many in this area. But, you know, based on what we see in other nearby markets, I think that's a fair estimate.
So the next question I have is, how is this going to interface with our fire department? Are they going to be adequately covered with the fire department as far as facilities that they have? for fire
Yeah,
prevention?
I've actually spoken with the Office of Emergency Management, and my understanding is that it absolutely will. I mean, I know you have a volunteer department, but because of mutual aid agreements and the borough does participate in the Union County Mutual Aid, that in the event that a fire call is made, the nearest paid department will be dispatched very quickly with the correct apparatus to address this building. And this building is already on, you know, the prospect of this building is already on their radar, as is the existing site, because the existing site presents even more challenges where there was there to be a fire in the existing facility, the existing buildings. Yeah, that's a good point. Doug also points out that this is a fully sprinklered building, but as a practice, even though the current building code doesn't require it, we build to a higher standard. We build to the NFPA 13 instead of the 13R standard. The 13R standard is a standard that is basically designed to prevent the loss of human life. It's to let people get out in time, but the standard that we actually build to is a greater standard, which includes air plenums, above drop ceilings, chases, attic space, otherwise enclosed, and bathrooms, otherwise enclosed spaces that are not typically sprinklered in accordance with the current code. We actually sprinkler them because we want to have a safer building, not only for human life and animal life, but also to try to protect the asset, try to protect people's livelihoods.
One last question. As far as the tax structure goes, is it going to be taxed as individual apartments or is it going to be taxed as an adult property?
So you heard the mayor speak briefly in his intro that you know, we submitted an application, you know, months ago for a financial agreement with the borough, which is, you know, not uncommon for redevelopment projects like this. I think, you know, almost all of the, you know, sizable redevelopment projects that you're seeing throughout the state in redevelopment areas are typically governed by a redeveloper agreement and also a financial agreement. So the financial agreement that we've agreed to with the borough requires us to pay a specified percentage of the revenue from the project, over a 30-year period. So it doesn't specify a per unit, tax, so to speak. It's intended to, if the project does well and we generate more revenue, we'll pay a higher, what's called annual service charge to the borough. If revenues are a little bit less than maybe what we projected, then we would pay, a slightly lower annual service charge or tax to the borough. And that, there are certain minimums in the agreement where, under no circumstances would we pay less than a certain amount, but that's, the agreement that's going to govern what ultimately will be paid once the project is developed. Up until that point, we're paying the land tax on the property.
The last question I have is, vacant property is across the street, is that going to be impacted by any of this? Is it utilize it correctly?
So the property on the south side of South Avenue is, really, it's 4 different parcels, and I can walk you through each of the parcels. Do we have an aerial done? This one is small. So the property that's the subject of the current application, site plan application that's before the planning board, is for only the property on the north side of South Avenue, which is this right here. This property, as Chris was describing, half of it was the former Petro property, and the other half was the former Casale property. This property is about 5.2 acres. And there's an existing redevelopment plan, an adopted redevelopment plan that covers this property. The parking lot, the small home, and the former Wells branch on the south side of South Avenue is about 1.75 acres. It's in a redevelopment area, but there is not a redevelopment plan that's been adopted yet.
So that basically doesn't say what it is right now.
We plan to use it for parking during construction on the north side of South Avenue. And then at some point in the future, once a redevelopment plan was adopted, and likely not until development was completed on the north lot, we would ultimately, develop the South Avenue.
That's owned by you now also?
Yes, several of the parcels that are covered by the redevelopment project we purchased in 2014. The balance of the parcels were purchased in the early part of this year, early to mid part of this year. So there was 4 individual properties that made up the assemblage: the Petro property, the Casale property, the single family home, and then the Wells branch.
Now, is all the space in those buildings, is that all vacant at this time?
Everything is vacant. Well, we have, are there any tenants left in the occupants?
There haven't been tenants in many years, but there have been, as you may know, there have been some occupants of the building during the Casale ownership. We succeeded in negotiating with them what are called consent judgments, which are agreements that are enforceable that require them to vacate, principally because we didn't want people occupying the building in its current condition. 2 of the 3 occupants are completely gone. They've removed all their belongings. They removed things from the parking lot that were in the parking lot as well across the street. And there's 1 remaining occupant who is we're continuing to work with him. He's been moving and things getting done. However, if push came to shove, we would have to enforce that judgment, which we're trying to hold off on until we give him every opportunity to move out. But the property is secure, and I'm working also with the police department and the fire department so that they know who's there, when they're there, and for what purposes.
Thank you very much. Sorry.
Thank you. That's okay. I wasn't counting. Anyone else?
Russ Grant, Public Report. Many folks that live on Willow and even Myrtle are concerned that there may come a time at some point that the traffic pattern on South Avenue may be disrupted for whatever reason. Do you envision that ever occurring?
During construction?
Yeah.
Other than for the construction of utility extensions from South Avenue, from Center Street onto the property, and Doug can speak in more detail to exactly where each of the utilities are proposed to be. During those periods of time where we're excavating the street, there can sometimes be partial road closures. And we would, as Chris said, we would work with the police department to make sure we had traffic control and that the disruption was, as little as it could be on the traffic flow in the surrounding area. Other than that, we don't intend to block existing roads or shut roads down. Unfortunately, one of the biggest challenges that we have on projects like this typically is where can we put material for storage? It wouldn't be uncommon to have 100+ construction workers on the site at any point in time. Where are they going to park? Here, we have a adequately sized parking lot to be able to stage material and also park vehicles. That's the biggest challenge that we have to overcome. And knowing that we have that, I feel very confident saying we're not going to create any road or traffic issues.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, do you know what type of, I guess, businesses are going to go in with retail spaces? Where are you parking them?
That's an excellent question. As of today, we don't have any signed commitments or letters of intent in place with any retailers, which is not uncommon. We haven't started marketing the site, and typically we won't have tenants identified until we're within 6 to 12 months of opening the building. Yeah, it's a little bit early, but we've tried to design the large courtyard area in front of the retail space. A lot of the hardscape that runs along Center Street, South Avenue, the way that the service corridors are set up in the retail, the fact that we have a ton of loading to services, we're hoping to get a strong food service use here. We'd love to have a cafe, a restaurant. We feel like we have adequate parking in our proposed deck to service some of the more parking intensive retail uses. We think a lot of the retailers here are not going to have huge parking demands because there's a fair amount of pedestrian traffic here, and with the number of residents who will live in the building, I think a lot of the retail traffic is going to come from the residents. But small service uses. I mean, if you look at our site plan, you can see all of our unit sizes are 1,400 square feet, 1,700 square feet. I think our biggest corner units are 3,800 square feet, 2,200 square feet. I mean, generally, the intent is mom and pop retail, local retail. If we could get a national or regional food service chain, we would love to. And I think the location of the property would warrant that. But there's some uncertainty now as to ultimately who will be here.
Sure, I guess just because in other projects, like Westfield and Cranford, you see the national chains kind of like a revolving door for retail spaces, whereas some of the old flagships, like down in Cranford, with the rail, with some of the other restaurants, where it's, they're startups and it's close to new, but it's more a small scale operation. So, I mean.
Yeah, the smaller format retail is the safer way to go for a building like this. But to your point, I mean, retail now, whether you're a national retailer and you're on Route 22 or Route 17 or Route 4, or you're a small neighborhood center retailer, retail is difficult now. I mean, there's a lot of competition. The influence of e-commerce has been, has devastated a number of retailers. So retail's not like it was 10 or 15 years ago, where if you were in the right location, you knew. It wasn't a matter of who was going to be there. It was a matter of how much you were going to get for the space. Today it's a lot more difficult. And we have a fair amount of retail space in this building, so the leasing process is going to take some time.
So would you be open, say the retail model is open for 6 months or a year? Would you be open to maybe focusing on a nonprofit,
Occupy the space?
Yeah, or something like that.
We're open to interim uses, temporary uses. I mean, the worst thing for us is having a building like this that has empty storefronts. I mean, we can put pretty signage in the storefronts and make it look good, but never says the right thing about a building if you have a lot of vacancy. So, we would be very open-minded to trying to, keep the building as occupied as possible, not just the apartments, but the retail.
Very awesome. Thank you.
else?
Deborah Bennett, 421 4th Avenue. I just have a question on the public parking that I believe after the meetings I heard we're going to have some public. Are we going to be able to park there and come to town council meetings? Or is it only going to be like the King's Hall where you're going to park there to go shopping in their stores, and on North Avenue when we put in the CVS, it's just for there, which is all the parking off of the street on North Avenue. And now the other businesses don't have parking. So I just want to know if we're going to be able to park there and walk to Loaded, or if we're going to have to just do your facilities.
That's a great question, and I'm sure during our planning board presentation, parking is going to be something that's going to be discussed a bunch, because not only do we need to have adequate parking for our residents and for for the retail tenants and their visitors, but the redevelopment plan was written very specifically to require and to encourage some public parking within the building. So just to walk you through, this is a schematic of our proposed parking deck and each of the different levels. The way the deck is designed, there is access control at the entrance to the parking deck that anybody that came into the deck would have to go through. That's meant so that before people can exit the deck, if they're going to the retail stores, they can get validated and they can come out, or if it's a resident, they might be paying a fee in order to park on the deck. But members of the public, once you get into the deck, you'll be able to park anywhere on the ground floor, which on the ground floor we have approximately 100 spaces, I want to say, 99? Okay. Which should be a comfortable amount to service the retail space. It exceeds the requirement for parking for the retail space. I think the requirement is only about 60 spaces, we have about 100, so we're hoping that some of those ground floor spaces will get used by some of the ground floor residents and people who might be coming to the property to shop at the retail, but maybe coming to shop somewhere across the street, or might be going to town hall.
Right.
There's nothing to preclude them from parking in the property. The property won't be restricted.
So they'll park and then they'll pay a fee when they leave, is that what you're saying?
There would be, before you could leave, there would be a fee to get out.
Okay. So like, I know our seniors are concerned because they use the firehouse for their meeting and they were parking in the vacant lot there, and now it's like where they're going to park to go to their meetings, and they're concerned that it's not going to have any facilities for parking, and parking is a big issue in our,
We know.
for other
The-
towns.
In addition to parking in the deck, which I was saying, is going to be accessible to members of the public, we are also building a 18-space lot. You can see it on here. On the south parcel, south side of South Ave, I don't know if you can see this, I apologize, it's a little bit small, but there's a small parking lot next to the fire department
Right.
that has 8 or 9 existing parking spaces.
Right.
So we're going to be dedicating a portion of our property here to combine with the borough's property so that we can create 18 spaces. So there'd be an addition of 9 or 10 spaces immediately adjacent to the fire department, the police department. I think a lot of the people that come to Borough Hall, they're likely going to park there first if we're trying to go across the street.
Well,
So that.
yeah, I didn't know you were going to have this outside.
That's something that it's not only in the redevelopment plan that was adopted, but it's in the redeveloper agreement that we've signed with the borough.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I have a question. I'm sorry. Mr. Patterson, you want to step forward? Just a quick question. The total time frame of the building being constructed, how many years will it take to build the project?
I think a reasonable estimate from the time we start, which the first thing that's going to happen is demolition of the existing buildings. And I would say that call it the pre-development schedule, or the remediation and demolition schedule is probably going to be around 6 months. And it likely won't start until the very early part of next year. As Chris mentioned, you know, if we had the ability to, if we had all the required, you know, agency approvals, we would take the buildings down today, even though we don't have, you know, all of our local land use approvals. But realistically, we probably won't be able to start until early next year. If that process takes 6 months, we're looking at, you know, June, July of next year to start earthwork, foundations, infrastructure, and then ultimately to start, you know, vertical construction after that. From the middle of next year, I would say it's a good 18 months, possibly a little bit more, to finish the building. So realistically, you're looking at late 2019 or early 2020 to be done.
Thank you. Mr. Patterson, you had your hand up?
Good evening. Dick Patel, Mayor, Sarah. I'm Bruce Patterson, 225 South Ave. It's no secret that I've been pushing gardens, trying to get the best deal possible from you on residents of Borough. So I do have a couple questions, but I just want, I know you're a reasonably good mayor. I mean, good day, you can, you know, show it. So I just want to bring up a couple items, and I know some of the planning board members are here also, and for you, you know, to think about and be amenable as a good neighbor when it comes down to the site plan review. If you want, I mean, I can give you a copy and make a couple of copies.
Sure, we'll take that, absolutely.
It's not first, it'll be second. Yeah, what I highlighted in green, I just want to go over for your consideration, and of course the planning board's consideration also. One is a meeting room for public purposes within your project. I hope there's a large room and that it could be used for public purposes. We do have a rec complex, but that room's kind of small. And the seniors do need a firehouse, but on occasion you do need a larger public venue, much like we're having something right here. So if that's something you can.
Why don't you go through all of them, and then I'll try to respond to one at a time.
This was brought up by I think Ed Kolnick. High voltage power lines. Your drawing A4.1 didn't show any, and I'm just wondering, is it possible to bury them? So you do have a nice, clean project like that. One of your drawings show the existing, and they're kind of ugly.
You can see it on the ground in the photo there, lower right.
Yeah, okay, on the far, right underneath the measure, 2.2, and just the power line. You know, if they could be buried, that'd be great. I don't know if you can do it or not, but that is something that can go look nice and clean. Yeah, Maple and South, that's number 7 on the top of the second page. Maple and South, the issue, one of the major issues that really popped up first in my mind when this whole project was starting was that your ingress and egress is actually almost right across from the fire station. And I feel for the safety of drivers and pedestrians and your residents and even the rest of the borough residents, I think the driveway should be actually down towards Maple and possibly put a light there. But that's a serious safety issue, be right across from the firehouse. Whatever you're going to look, maybe you're going to see the firehouse. I brought that up all the time.
Okay.
Pedestrian walkover. I mean, it's great to have a walkable town for the commuters going over to the train station, stop getting a cup of coffee somewhere. But I'll tell you, with that many people living in the project and traffic light right there, and there's a lot of traffic, we're ground zero for major traffic issues. I think it's going to be an F-rated intersection. I'm not positive. But anyway, with more pedestrians crossing that street, these lights will be prolonged even further. Really get messed up there, traffic-wise. It's always back up. So pedestrian walkover, and that was brought up, and I don't know, nobody really followed through in discussing that, but hopefully the planning board and Russo project could get together and figure out something like that to alleviate, there's so many people and commuters coming from that project going over to the train station. Number 12, green space, open space. If something could be adjusted to get more green space and open space. Garwood is basically built out. I don't know if you know that. Everybody else does. And we have a woeful lack of open space and green space. I mean, you do have some on your layout. If something could happen more, then hopefully the planning board can take the reins on that one. Number 16 is the historical aspect. On drawing A3.2, which is under the mayor, that's the South building. That was the Alcoa building for decades and decades that Mr. Mix is talking about. By the way, I'm the president of the Art Historical Committee. So I'm concerned about our historical aspects of the town. And this to me, is a project, I'm not talking about the factory area, that's kind of very like that. But that building has aluminum architecture, where normally you would see like steel panels, powder coating or something. But it's actually made of aluminum because it's Alcoa. So if somehow you could incorporate the aluminum panels, even the window frames are aluminum, but the panels would be neat to have somehow incorporated into the building. That's a suggestion. The last is garbage street lamps. I'm sure the planning board will be talking about that right down South Ave Center. A couple of more items. I'm not sure if you have units on the first floor, living units, but normally in high density projects, and you know this, you really don't put living units on the first floor. I know you have retail, but they shouldn't be on the first floor. That's just a comment. Yeah, this is going back across the street since you did cross over that item. But parking, a couple of residents brought up an issue of parking. And the fire personnel, they have, I don't know how many people they have in the fire department, how many volunteers, but they normally need like 15 to 20 spots. When there's a function or a fire going on, you said for a hall employee will be parking there. Senior club on occasion, has meetings there. It's woefully short. I don't think the fire department's going to want to park in large parking lot across the street from the firehouse. So something really needs to be addressed there, and hopefully, maybe on the second phase of the planning board. Just a couple of questions. Is that pool still in the project?
Yes.
But that's just for residents.
The pool would be reserved for residents, yes.
And for commuter parking, could you just discuss about the commuter parking? I know you have a large parking lot.
Sure. All right, well I appreciate all your comments. Maybe I'll start from the beginning and try to...
I could have additional comments on numbers, but these are the
okay.
elements. All
right, so the first comment you made was about having a meeting room for public purposes. We don't have a space inside the building that I think would be suitable for public meetings, but we spent a lot of time working with the planning board's planner, hardware consultants, when it came to creating a large outdoor public space adjacent to the Borough Municipal Building. And I just want to show you what our current design is. We've been spending a fair amount of time recently with our landscape architect, Tom Bauer, from Lillo and Bauer, who's created the hardscape and planting and green space design for the area in front of the plaza in front of the retail space. And you can see from this rendering, basically what I'm describing. It's about an 8,000 to 9,000 square foot area, and I'll show you in a site plan where it is relative to Borough Hall, but it's almost directly across the street. And our hope is that this area will become a central gathering place, which if we're fortunate enough to get good retailers in here, given the way that we've designed the hardscape, there's a significant amount of space where you can have a farmer's market, you can have an outdoor, community event, a concert. This we think is going to hopefully be a big draw, not just for residents of the building, but for people in the community that are coming down South and Center Street. I mean, we consider South and Center Street to really be Main and Main in Garwood, and obviously there's a lot of activity in this area. I hope that this is a space that'll get used by the public. Your comment about the power lines is, couldn't agree with you more. We would certainly, when we can have underground power as opposed to above ground or aerial power, that's preferred. Our engineer, Doug, can speak to this in more detail and give you some of the realities of what PSE&G requires in terms of their different districts and what the limitations are for above ground, underground power. I can tell you for the extension of power service from the public right of way into our buildings, it'll be underground. For the existing poles, and we've been down this road before on other projects, if you're in an aerial territory, which is what this part of Union County is, PSE&G is not going to allow power lines to go underground. They will not allow a developer to start at their property line, drop power underground, and then when it gets to the opposite property line, come back up and out. And Doug can speak to the technical reasons for that, but the visibility of the poles is really a reality that we're going to have to live with. And I think because of the setback of the buildings from the curb line, the 20 to 30 foot setback that we have, depending on where you measure from, the power lines will hopefully have a less significant impact on our residents. But I'd be lying to you if I told you I thought we could get rid of them. I think your next comment pertained to the pedestrian traffic in the area, having a walkover across South Avenue. Having a walkover or a pedestrian bridge is really not feasible. There's a lot of things that can be done to help pedestrians cross a busy roadway outside of a crosswalk. But to do a pedestrian bridge, it would have to be ADA accessible. You'd have to have elevators on each side of it. It becomes a massive structure and a costly thing to do that would really not be warranted for a project like this. That being said, there's a number of things you can do in the roadway. Also something that Doug can probably speak to in more detail: traffic calming devices, rumble strips, beacons, right? Some of the things that we've done on other projects. Do you want to chime in on that?
I mean, there's additional traffic signal additions or add-ons with the push buttons that'll count down when those are activated. The green time gets impacted on the road to allow for time for pedestrians to cross, and as well as the measures in terms of traffic calming to slow cars down could also be added. The South Ave being a county road, certainly those types of traffic calming measures would be subject to their review and approval.
We anticipate that not only the planning board, but also the county is going to have a lot to say about, our studies, our assumptions with respect to traffic in and around the property, including pedestrian activity. And I can tell you that we would not be adverse to implementing traffic calming devices for pedestrians. I mean, we want our residents to be able to, cross South Avenue and Center Street safely. I mean, there's a lot of surrounding uses here that I think residents would want to access, and I think vice versa. I think there's pedestrian traffic that would want to get to our building, and facilitating that I think would benefit us. The location of the driveway. That's yeah.
The driveway into the property, basically going right into the parking garage, is just over 100 feet away from the firehouse's driveway. It's outside of the striping area. They do not block the box store striping out in front of the firehouse. So it's meeting those requirements safe enough distance away from the fire department's driveway. So the plan requires 85% or a maximum of 85% impervious coverage or 15% open space, and this plan provides just under 20% open space. So we are exceeding what's permitted or required under the plan.
You had made a comment about the Casale building and some of the aluminum that was on the facade of the building. Even though obviously we're demolishing all the existing buildings, they're really not suitable for reuse. If you look at our proposed renderings, you'll see that the exterior facade of the building, proposed building, is a combination of composite metal paneling, brick, precast concrete. We have stone at the base of the building that would wrap the loggia that's running along the retail. There's going to be a fair amount of metal. And when I say metal, I'm talking about Luca Bond, which is an alcohol product, Reno Bond. This is a fairly modern-looking design, and I think that there's going to be opportunities to, speak to the industrial past of the site, and hopefully, when we get down to the nitty-gritty architecture before the planning board, we start talking about how windows are designed and the size of openings. I think there'll be some things that you'll see, pay homage to some of the historical buildings on site. Beyond that, I'm not sure what else we can do, but we're very open-minded when it comes to building design. We can certainly discuss that further.
Mr. Patterson, your comment about the street lamps, they are part of the site plan application already. So those are already contemplated and there's in our site plan application. So the street lamps that are intended to be all along South Ave are as well.
I think we covered everything. I might have missed.
Commuter parking.
Commuter parking, same. I would have the same thought on that as on the public parking. There's not going to be anything that's going to restrict, from commuters from being able to access the garage. The one thing that we've thought about, and we haven't really figured out how to implement this yet, but we try to avoid a situation where you have a ton of daily parkers, whether they're members of the public, commuters that are using the deck. And what's sometimes done with commuters is, parking permits are issued on a monthly permit basis. This way we know who the commuters are, we know the license, plate numbers on the vehicles, and if commuters are going to park in the deck, normally they're going to want to do it for a longer term period than just a day or week. So if we end up having commuter parking in the garage, I think it would likely require a longer term commitment than just a daily parker. We'd rather, just for a from a security standpoint, a monitoring standpoint, it's nice to know where we're going to be going. And I think most commuters, and we've seen in other towns, are happy to purchase a monthly permit if they think they're going to use parking on a long-term basis.
The number of parking spots versus the residents that take up certain spots.
Yeah, we think we have a pretty comfortable amount of parking. I mean, we're just under 500 spaces total, right, Doug? What's the exact number?
482 spaces, 435 of firefighting land for both retail and leasing office and residence.
So theoretically, we have a surplus of 47 spaces. And if you use the requirements of the redevelopment plan to estimate what our parking demand will be, we have a surplus of 47 spaces. But if you look at what's going on in terms of parking demand just about everywhere, parking demand continues to go down at almost every community that we have every year, especially communities that are close to transit and downtown areas. I don't know if it's the influence of Uber or if it's the demographics of people that are living in these buildings, but we're seeing very low parking demand relative to what it was not that long ago on some of our projects, and I would not be surprised if that was the case here.
The ratio is actually very high. If you exclude 67 spaces that are pure retail dedicated spaces, it's a 1.39 space per unit ratio, which is very high.
What we're providing.
Yes.
Okay.
Do anyone else like to speak to the microphone? If you keep it within reason, Mr. Patterson, go right ahead.
Do not.
Thank you. Mr. DeFabio, good evening.
Good evening, everybody. I got it. Good evening, everybody. My name is Pat DeFabio, 414 Hemlock Avenue. Excuse my hat, but they call me Pat, the cat with the hat, so they recognize who I am. But I've been with the fire department for 68 years, and I'm still on. And I want to ask you a question. Could you guarantee me that you will never have fires because you have a sprinkler system in each
I can't guarantee you that we'll never have a fire, and we hope and pray that we won't. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
This is the reason why I ask. Of all the fires we had one of our fire hydrants go out on a cold winter night. Went out, we had to go to another block to get the hose and run it through the street to get a fire, and we lost one child, a teenager, to be honest with you, and that stuck with me. And if these things go off, you say mutual aid is going to help us. Is that what someone you say about mutual aid?
Yes.
But mutual aid is about 2 or 3 miles away, either way. Time that mutual aid comes with their ladder truck, we're going to be in trouble. And if the sprinkler don't work, or somebody carbon monoxide, somebody's hanging out the window, we've seen that happen, and we had to put ladders up there. And it's a heck of a thing to carry a person down from 2nd floor on their back, or a hose, loaded hose to put out a fire. So I think we need a ladder truck. That's what I'm trying to say. I know it's going to be expensive, but I think we could get a grant, and maybe if you could help us out with some little cash, we can get our fire truck. And also, I'm president of the Senior Citizens in Garwood, and we have over 40 to 50 people that come to our meetings first and third Thursday of every month. We have one tomorrow. Now, the parking lot, you say you have 17 or 18 parking spaces on this side here, on the
South side.
South side, right where the firehouse is. Now, a lot of times we fill that up, with the kid, the way it is now with the seniors. And if there's a fire, the firemen have to use the same lot. So they don't know where the heck to go. So you got to give that some thought. I know you have across the street to go, they can go across, come up, but then we got problems, how the seniors walk across the street, and they get hit with a car or something. But I think you should give that thought with the parking lot, and that truck especially. The ladder truck is very important. So give it some thought. Maybe if it comes to money, that can be thrashed out, but we need one very badly, because I carried people, like I said, been with the department, volunteered for 68 years, and I'm still on. And carrying those hoses up loaded with water is a heck of a thing. But if you have a ladder truck, it's so simply, especially if your building's going to be 4 stories high in the back and 3 in the front, right?
It's really 4 stories throughout.
Throughout. So that's pretty high to put a ladder up there. Or even call mutual aid. Mutual aid, time they come, a lot of trouble could happen.
All right, well, I appreciate your comments.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chris can speak in a little bit more detail to, discussions that he's had with the fire department with respect to mutual aid and with respect to other issues. But there's there's a number of things in the design of the building, not just the sprinklers that Chris already spoke to, but the fire ratings of the stairwells, the different corridors, egress pathways out of the building that are not only intended to meet code but to exceed code, that I think are important when you're thinking about what are the risks of this building. You mentioned fire hydrants freezing, which we know can certainly happen. We're going to have standpipes at the building, fire department connections, so that God forbid there was a fire, the fire department would not just be relying on fire hydrants in the streets. They would have a way to pump a significant amount of water through the building at various locations around the perimeter of the building. I'm not going to profess to be an expert when it comes to firefighting and sprinkler systems, but I can tell you there's going to be a lot of testimony before the planning board when it comes to that exact issue, because you're raising an important point, and it's something that's come up before in our other hearings with the public, so I know that's going to get a lot of attention. In terms of parking for the senior citizens, we recognize that there's in some cases at some times there's a parking shortage around Borough Hall, around the fire department. We're doing what we can to try to alleviate that problem. I'm not going to say that our development is going to solve all the parking problems that the borough has. As much as we want to try to help, it's also not entirely our responsibility to provide every single parking space that the community could need. But I think our parking structure is going to have a very significant positive impact that is really going to be felt once the building is built. I mean, I know you still have to walk across South Avenue to get from the parking deck to Borough Hall. And maybe there's some things that can be done at the South Avenue crossing to facilitate that and make that a little safer and easier. But with 480 additional parking spaces right across the street from the Borough Hall and Fire Department, I think you're going to see a lot of the current parking issues alleviated. You want to add anything to that, Chris?
All I want to add is that you can be confident that during the course of the planning board process, there will be an opportunity for the borough departments to make comment with regard to the application, with regard to the building, its function and operation, particularly with regard to the issues of public safety. And those are matters that we take very, very seriously because, again, we want to be good neighbors to everyone around us in Garwood, but first and foremost, we want to be good landlords to our residents. We want to make sure we have a safe facility and a facility that is not only safe for our residents, but also for the public servants that are going to be providing certain services, principally fire service and police service to the site. So we don't have an approved project, and we've been already interfacing with those departments. We hope to have a greater dialogue with the fire department so that there is an understanding of how would one of these unfortunate events be addressed most appropriately and what features are built into the building that are going to assist and protect firefighters when and if they do have to face an emergency situation. And similarly, we'll work with the police department to make sure that all aspects of public safety are addressed in the design and ultimately the construction and then occupancy of the building.
Thank you. Mr. Patterson, Mr. Patterson, you said you had two numbers?
Yeah, two numbers.
Two numbers.
But just a question.
And don't forget the chief of police is here.
I'll be throw that town hall meeting. Anyway, Bruce Patterson, Garwood. Now, do you have a rear view? I don't have the photos, the pictures with me, but do you have a rear view of the complex?
Along the rail line?
Yeah.
I'm not sure we do.
All right. I was just wondering.
We could bring one. I mean, if you come to the planning board meetings, we'll have one.
All right. How's that?
I have a feeling I'm going to see you there.
I might stop by.
Mr. Russo, I promise you.
Now I don't show up. No, but anyway, just two numbers I wanted to talk about, and I brought this up at a council meeting, which actually took place here back in July. And if you're looking at Exhibit 11, which I handed out, and the council knows this, I was talking about the land and existing conditions, that very first line. And you have 11,453,622. And basically, if it's a 5.2 acre, land property, it's $2.2 million an acre. And I tried to explain to the council that that number seems very, very high, and something's wrong with this number. Could you just give me an idea why you worked up 11.4 million?
I wish it was lower, but unfortunately, that's our best estimate as to what it's going to be. I can tell you that the major components of that line item in our budget, obviously the acquisition cost for the land. You can look and see, what was paid for the Petro property. The Petro property, which we purchased in,
we purchased the Petro property in June of 2014. We paid $2,350,000 for the property as is. We purchased the South property in June of this year, June this year, $3 million. The terms of those sales were, as is where it is, subject to all conditions. We assume responsibility for cost of buildings, for remediating the site. So when you look at land existing conditions, that's not just our land basis, that's the cost to demo the buildings, clean the site. There are other components of existing conditions, which existing conditions, that's not our term, that's a CSI, Construction Specifications Institute division. So we use a standard system of allocating our costs that's used amongst in the construction industry. So existing conditions is widely defined to include not just demo, remediation, like site clearing, ground improvement, things like we have to support our buildings or our proposed parking deck on deep foundations, CMCs. We have to do dynamic compaction, rapid compaction, which is part of the construction of the building or the pre-construction work. That's all included in that. And I don't think this was a case of, we had property owners that were, had unreasonable expectations for what their property was worth. They were being greedy. There's a lot of costs here that even if we got the land for free, which obviously the Petro family and the South family, Sally's, they're bankruptcy at the time that we were negotiating the products, and they incurred a significant amount of debt to get out of bankruptcy just so that they could sale go through. Despite what we would consider to be relatively reasonable land values for the parcels that were acquired, because of the cost to prepare the site for development, our land basis is significantly relative to the size of the site. I'm agreeing with you. Anytime you're over $2 million an acre, I don't care if it's a residential site, ultimately the site, we're not talking about the Hudson waterfront where land has a different value. This is an expensive site, expensive project.
The other sheet that I had in there. What I over the financials, and this is what I got. So I don't know what that sheet is. It's called the multi-year cash flow projection, and at the very bottom I highlighted it. And this caused some concern because it was talking about 2024. I guess it sounds like you're going to be selling the property in 2024, walking away with a $38 million profit after all the debt and everything's paid off. Am I reading that number right? Sure, it's like word for word. Sure.
The $38 million is the difference between what the property theoretically could sell for 10 years from now. And I'll walk you through where this analysis came from. It's actually, this was requested by AC Financial, who was hired by the borough to review our financial year application and all of our underlying model, our budget, our cash flow projections, all our rent projections. And we had months of back and forth with them, submitting our model. They had questions and comments. permits, we addressed them there. So it was a pretty collaborative process to get into a financial model that everybody felt was reasonable assumption. This $38 million number is the difference between what the property can sell for and our debt on the property, not the cost of the project. So in round numbers, this is an $80 million project cost. If we have $55 million in debt on it, and the project costs $80 million, $25 million of that 38 is equity. That's equity invested by the ownership group of the project. So the gain would be the difference between the $38 million and the $25 million of equity. And you know what I'll say to you when you look at this, right? And this is two excerpts from our model. This is a small portion of what was submitted. We went through an extensive negotiation, for lack of a better word. We weren't, you know, our proposal with respect to financials for the site, the terms and structure of the, you know, financial agreement was not just, you know, take by the borough and sort of rubber stamp and the mayor and council president can speak to this. I mean, there was months of dialogue, and you know, there were requests that were made on behalf of the borough to change some terms of the financial agreement, and to the extent that we could agree to it and not jeopardize the project, we agreed. And ultimately, we got to a point where both sides were comfortable and you know, we had agreement. So, I mean, I'd be happy to speak to, you know, our assumptions in more detail. And I think Casey would say this as well. I mean, we've been very transparent during the process. I mean, I've looked at the financial agreements for a number of other development projects, and I've looked at the submissions that other developers have made. And not, you know, there's plenty of other developers that have to go around the only ones that can do it. But I think we give more information, we're more transparent, and most. We know that whatever we submit is subject to question or comment and scrutiny, and we're happy to go through that have that dialogue. But come back to your question. I think your initial reading is correct.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Madison. Anyone else that's come to the microphone? Seeing none, I'd like to close the meeting. Thank Mr. Russo, Mr. Mason, your engineer, for coming this evening. Of course, I thank all the residents for being here this evening, taking time out of their busy lives to come forward. And as we discussed before, it will probably be the site plan approval in November with the planning board, and also more meetings will be given by Russo. Thank you, everyone, for coming out.